Now the subject before us is Sri Ramakrishna's non-dualistic practice and its significance. From a historical point of view, Sri Ramakrishna's practice of Advaita sadhana or non-dualistic spiritual practice has got a great significance from the standpoint of history of religious thoughts. If you read the latest books on religious thoughts, one idea that is often repeated is the idea of universality of religion. Now, if you compare books written on religious thought till about 1920s or maybe till about the beginning of 20th century, you won't find much reference to a concept like universal religion. Sometimes these terms were used, but not in the sense in which it is used today. Today, when you use the term universal religion, what you mean is universality of spiritual experience, which is the essence of all religious traditions. This is the real meaning of universal religion understood in today's context. So if you attend any interreligious dialogues, even in interreligious dialogues conducted by the WCC, World Council of Churches, especially from 1960s onwards, there is a trend to use this term universal religion, not in the sense in which it was used till the beginning of 20th century. Till the beginning of 20th century, universal religion meant a religious tradition which is widespread, which has got a universal following, which has got adherents and followers and believers in all the 7 continents of the world. Maybe in terms of demographic popularity, a universal religion was supposed to be universal in a geographic or cultural terms. But today, that term is used not in that sense. In early days, Christianity and Buddhism sometimes claimed to be universal religions, because Christianity, of course, the largest number of adherents. Buddhism had its followers almost in all the continents of the world. But today, it is used in a different sense. Universal religion today means a religion which has got a universal appeal, not in terms of the number of followers, but rather the universality of this fundamental spiritual ethos, ideas which they preach, which they profess. This is actually a direct result of Sri Ramakrishna's practice of Advaita sadhana or non-dualistic experience. Before entering the topic directly, I shall just give a brief outline of that important episode in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. When Sri Ramakrishna was living in Dakshineshwar, a great Advaitic teacher, Totapuri, happened to come to Dakshineshwar. Originally, he was from the northwestern part of India, most probably Punjab or that part of India which is known today as Pakistan. He was from West Punjab, perhaps. He went to the banks of Narmada, which is in the central provinces, and performed spiritual practice for almost 40 years, and reached the highest non-dualistic experience of unity of the individual soul with the universal reality. Now, what happens to a great spiritual person, a liberated soul, who experiences his unity with the entire creation? The creation itself becomes a play for him. Everything in this world reminds him of the absolute reality. A flower may not represent beauty, but rather it represents the grandeur of the absolute reality, of which everything in this world, including that flower, is an expression. So the whole world becomes a playground for a spiritual person who transcends the sensory world, who transcends the empirical level of consciousness. That is what happened to him. So he left the place where he was performing spiritual practices, that is in today's central provinces, in the Madhya Pradesh, in the banks of river Narmada, which is far away from the Himalayas, somewhere in the central part of India, far away from his own native land. And after that he started wandering all over the country, and he came to the place where Sri Ramakrishna was staying and practicing spiritual sadhana, Dakshineshwar, the temple. When he reached there, he found, to his total surprise, an extremely advanced spiritual soul, whom he found to be the right person, the fittest person to practice non-dualistic sadhana. Now, I shall just give a few outline of what it really means. Non-dualism teaches you that the creation is one, reality is one, it is a supreme consciousness, it is the immanent reality within all of us. It is also the all-pervading, omnipresent reality. It is also the transcendental reality. It doesn't deny any path, any religious tradition, but it tells you that there is something beyond all these formalistic religious concepts and dogmas. That is the intuitive inner spiritual experience. And when you reach that level of experience, you experience not just believing, you experience the unity of the individual soul with the universal consciousness. This is the essence of Advaita philosophy, in short. So, Tothapuri, the great Advaitic teacher, found Sri Ramakrishna to be an advanced spiritual practitioner who had already left behind all that is mundane and empirical, worldly, who has transcended all the limitations of the senses, mind and intellect. So he asked him, are you interested in practicing this non-dualistic spiritual sadhana? Sri Ramakrishna had reached the stage of childlike simplicity and purity. He said, I should get permission from my mother. And he went to the temple, not his own old mother who was staying nearby in the same, house. But he went straight to the shrine, the temple, and he prayed to the Divine Mother, and the mother told him, rather he heard the divine voice from the shrine telling him, yes, you can practice, he has come here for that. And Sri Ramakrishna practiced this non-dualistic spiritual sadhana under his great teacher. Now, his own teacher had taken long period and had stayed on the banks of the sacred river Narmada for 4 decades, 40 years. But Sri Ramakrishna got this experience immediately, within a very short time. When Sri Ramakrishna was instructed, when he received the instruction verbally from his teacher, that instruction came to him not as words, but as his own innate experience. This is what really happened. And for 3 days he sat in samadhi. And of course, I don't want to go into those details. In the beginning, Sri Ramakrishna had some difficulty because his mind was so firmly attached to Divine Mother. So the name and form of the deity whom he was meditating on, worshipping for several years, could not be transcended. But Totapuri asked him to meditate on the middle of the 2 eyebrows. When Sri Ramakrishna expressed this difficulty in reaching that experience, Totapuri went round, took a sharp piece of glass and pierced it between the 2 eyebrows and asked Sri Ramakrishna to meditate on that point, and immediately Sri Ramakrishna could transcend the empirical, the ideal of God with name and form and attributes, and he reached the level of supreme consciousness where he identified his own unity with the supreme consciousness. And he sat there in samadhi for 3 days. This is the story, this is the episode, this is the incident in his life. Now here are a few things that we have to understand. Now, when we get instruction or when we read a book, when we hear in some lectures or teachings on non-dualistic philosophy, they come to us as words, ideas, concepts, doctrines. But when it came to Sri Ramakrishna, it didn't come as words or ideas. It immediately became a matter of experience to him. This is technically called the doctrine of Shabda Aparokshvada in Vedantic tradition. It's called Shabda Aparokshvada. I shall explain this. An advanced soul, a spiritually advanced soul, whose mind is pure, whose mind is free from all other tendencies, impressions, and accumulated thought currents, when is fully concentrated on the supreme spiritual ideal, then what happens? The moment he comes in contact with that ideal, either through instruction from the teacher or through any other means, it immediately becomes a matter of experience to him. That's because he has reached such a high level of spiritual fitness. Now, there are other spiritual aspirants who are sincere spiritual seekers and who are practicing meditation, worship, contemplation, and so on. But their minds are not so fully focused. When they come out of the meditation hall or the worship room, their mind goes back to the world. Again they try. So their minds are in fact divided into 2 conflicting streams of thought. On the one hand, they're sincere spiritual seekers, they read sacred books, they listen to spiritual ideas, they worship, they meditate, they do japa, repetition of the holy name. But then, at other times, their mind is distracted. So they have to continue this practice for a long time till their mind becomes fully concentrated on the object of meditation. So they have to practice what is called meditation on the meaning of these great spiritual instructions. It is called dhyana abhyasa, practice of meditation on the meaning of the sacred ideas, sacred words, sacred doctrines, till all other ideas, all other thought currents are completely removed from their mind. And their mind becomes identified with one central thought current, idea, that is spiritual consciousness, or Brahma Vidya, or the ideal of Brahman or Atman. When they reach that level of spiritual fitness or contemplation or meditation, then a single instruction is enough for them to reach the level of experience. This is sometimes explained in many scriptures in the form of an analogy. Well, I would try to translate that analogy into our own terms, in today's terms. Suppose you have lost something very precious, something which is a matter of survival for you. On the way, you're walking in the streets. When you reach your home, suddenly when you open your bag, you find something very precious, something very important, which is a matter of survival, missing in your bag. So you will leave everything behind. You will leave everything else behind. And you will go in search of that missing object. It could be passport, visa, maybe social security, whatever it is. Something very precious in today's times. So you know very well that you have to get it back. There is no alternative. You may lose everything else, but you can't afford to lose this particular object. So what happens? You will go in search of it. You will retrace your steps. You will walk along the same street through which you have walked. And suppose you find it lying right in front of you on the street. You won't mistake it. You won't have second thoughts whether this object which I am finding in front of me is the same object which I lost or something else. You don't have any confusion. You go straight and pick it up. No second thoughts. Now what happens when you are going in search of this lost object? Your mind is fully concentrated on that object alone. All other thoughts are pushed aside. All other thought currents, ideas are completely pushed aside, and your whole mind is fully focused on this particular object, nothing else. So when you find it lying in front of you, you have no difficulty in recognizing that object. You go straight towards it and pick it up. Similarly, when a spiritual seeker has pushed aside, has removed all other thought currents from his or her mind, and is fully focused on one great spiritual idea, nothing else. And at that time, when he happens to listen to this idea coming from somebody, that too from a great teacher, immediately he grasps it. For him, it is not a doctrine, not something in which you should believe. It is a matter of experience, inner experience to him. This is the essence of what I said earlier, Shabda Aparokshvada, which is an important doctrine in Advaita philosophy, non-dualistic system of thought. For those who are interested, we can say this school of doctrine, Shabda Aparokshvada, was held by the two great disciples of Shankaracharya, who were post-Shankarite Advaitins, Padmapada and Sureshwara. Sureshwara himself, he expounds this theory. He says that if you are spiritually fit, if you are fully endued with the four fundamental disciplines which are necessary for all spiritual aspirants, like the ability to discern between the real and unreal, and then complete renunciation, detachment towards pleasure in this world or next world, and complete inner self-control, and fourth, an intense desire for liberation. Nitya nitya vastu vekaha, ikamutra phalabhoga viragaha, samadhi sukha sampatti mumukshu. These are the 4 terms which are called sadhana chadushtayam in Vedanta, which I already outlined. First, you must have a strong sense of discerning mind. We must be able to distinguish what is real and what is unreal. Mentally, we must be able to give up what is unreal, what is mundane, what is empirical, what is transitory, what is changing, what is non-permanent. And again, we must have a sense of complete renunciation for any kind of enjoyment in this world or the other world, in heaven. Then we must have full self-control, and then most important, we must have an intense desire for spiritual enlightenment. If a spiritual seeker is endued with these 4 great qualifications, then spiritual experience is very close to him. So if you, when we hear spiritual ideas, when we listen to spiritual ideas, still if we find there's a conflict going on within our mind, it only means that we have to strive further, we have to push aside all other mundane empirical ideas from our mind. We may live in this world, do our duty, but keep in mind all these things are non-eternal. We may need them for living this world, but we should not be attached to those things. These are the characteristics of this particular school of philosophy. The other school, for academic interest, I shall say a few things. The other school is called Prasankhyanavada. Prasankhyanam means dhyana abhyasa, meditation, contemplation on the meaning of what you listen to, what you hear, what you understand. Till the meaning becomes a part of our conviction, a part of something that we fully believe in. So for ordinary spiritual seekers, they have to listen. Every day they have to read. They have to think. They have to contemplate. And they have to reinforce these spiritual ideas in their mind. And slowly try to spread the influence of these spiritual ideas throughout. I mean, when they worship, when they are performing worship in their rooms, they may be in a spiritual mood. That spiritual mood should also pervade slowly towards other moments in their life. That is the essence of the other school, which is meant for ordinary spiritual seekers. Now, in Sri Ramakrishna's case, when the Tautapuri instructed him that all these that you find around us are non-eternal, it's called a cosmic path. Everything other than the absolute reality is negated. What is left out is the absolute reality which is beyond definition, which the negator cannot negate himself. And ultimately, he comes to the experience that everything in this world is Brahman. Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahma, it is called. The first approach is we have to negate Nanta Prajnam, Na Bhish Prajnam, No Bhaida Prajnam, etc. And ultimately, the spiritual seeker comes to the level of experience when he realizes that everything in this world is an expression of that supreme consciousness. Now, this is the essence of universal religion. How does it become the essence of universal religion? That's what I'm going to explain next. Sri Ramakrishna himself gives an example in the Gospel. Now, suppose you are entering a house which happens to be built of the same brick, same type of brick, the same material. Now, when you enter the gate, which is made of bricks, you are not sure that the driveway, the pathway, the road leading towards the door of the house is made of the same brick. You may think, well, the gate is made of red brick, but certainly not the whole house. And then you find the driveway which leads to the door, the front door of the house, is also made of the same brick of which the gate is built. But then when you enter the room, the first floor, the ground floor, then you realize the ground floor also is made of the same bricks, the same material of which the gate is built, the driveway is built. And the staircase leading to the first floor is made of the same brick. So before we reach the terrace, we are not very sure what the other part of the building is made of. We know, suppose the building has got 3 stories. Till we reach the second story, we are sure, when we reach the second story, we become convinced that the whole building up to the second story is built of the same brick, same material. But we are not sure about the terrace and the third story. When we reach the third story, and when we reach the terrace, the extreme top of the building, then we realize, well, the whole building is actually made of the same material. Now, Advaitic realization, non-dualistic experience, is like reaching the terrace of the building. From the terrace, when you look down, you see only bricks everywhere. The first floor, the staircases, the gate, everything. You don't see anything other than bricks. So when you reach the highest spiritual experience, non-dualistic experience, and then when you look towards other religious ideas and doctrines, you can't say that my religion is all right, other religions are wrong. It will be as foolish as saying, well, the terrace is made of bricks, but not other parts of the building, because the person has realized the entire building, right from the gate, approach route, right up to the terrace, the top part of the building, are made of the same material. Similarly, a spiritual seeker, when you reach the highest non-dualistic experience, he cannot come into conflict with any religious tradition. He cannot come in conflict with any religious path. He realizes that every religion is an equally valid path leading towards the same goal. So there is unity of goal and there is diversity of means to reach that goal. This is what happens to a spiritual seeker when he or she reaches the highest level of non-dualistic experience. Now we have to remember, these ideas are not new. These ideas are already found in the Vedic literature. Mandukya Upanishad belongs to Acharya Veda, and in Rigveda also, the famous one, you see, Indram Mitram Varunam Agnirahu Adho Divyasa Suparno Garutman Ekam Sat Vitra Bagudha Vadanti Agnim Yamam Atarishwanamahu. This statement comes in the first mandala of Rigveda, which says that all the different deities, whether one religion calls it one name, or another religion may call it by another name, whatever may be the name by which these different deities are called, they are all different names that enlightened people use to call, to denote the same reality. When we reach the goal and when we look back towards the means, then we understand there is diversity with regard to means, but there is unity with regard to the goal. In the Mundaka Upanishad, which belongs to Acharya Veda, there is a well-known celebrated verse. You have to think of an analogy. All the rivers, Suppose there are 5 rivers which flow in the same direction and which empty their waters into the Pacific. Now, these rivers are called different names. They are called by different names when they are looked upon as rivers. But when the water reaches the ocean, the diversity with regard to means, the path, the rivers vanishes, and the unity alone exists. The unity is the point where the rivers merge with the ocean. Yadhanadyas, that is in the Mundagopanishad, it's stated here. Yadhanadyas yandamana samudri astam gacchandi namarupe vihaya tatha namarupa vimuktaha paratparam purusham upaidi divyam. Look up, just think of its application in universal religion. The verse says this much. Says, rivers are called by different names. But when they merge with the ocean, the diversity of means, the diversity with regard to the flowing waters, the different names and forms vanish. Similarly, a spiritually enlightened person who has reached the terrace of the building looks down and then he realizes the entire building is made of the same brick. So a spiritual seeker who reaches the highest non-dualistic experience, when he looks at other religions, he doesn't find anything wrong with that. For Sri Ramakrishna, realization of Jesus Christ was not a very difficult path. He saw the picture of baby Jesus, the Madonna's picture, and immediately he felt a divine light merging out of it. Now, Sri Ramakrishna was not baptized, and he practiced other different cults of Hinduism also. In Hindu tradition, monotheistic tradition, there are different conflicting cults and traditions. Sometimes there is a lot of conflict among them, Vaishnava, Shakta, Shaiva. I'm not going to those details. There is a lot of conflict and differences of views among them. For Sri Ramakrishna, it was not very difficult to see the same spiritual essence in all these apparently conflicting cults and groups. So, because he had already reached the highest spiritual experience, he could also see in Jesus Christ the same spiritual reality that he experienced the Divine Mother in different Vedantic spiritual traditions as well. In this context, there is a famous verse in the Mandukya Karika, which incidentally we are discussing every Friday in the old temple. There is a famous verse in that book which appears in the 3rd section, 3rd chapter, 17th verse. There the author says, Susiddhanta vivasthasu dvaitino nischida tridam parasparam viruddhyante taihi ayam na viruddhyate. This is the famous verse. I should translate it in English. The meaning is this. People who have not reached the highest spiritual experience, non-dualistic experience, people who are still in the process of evolving, fight among themselves. It's something like, see, 2 rivers, Indus and many other rivers, Satluj, Suraj, all these rivers are right now in Pakistan. Or Brahmaputra and Ganga, both flow towards Bay of Bengal. Now, Brahmaputra may fight with Ganga. You are different, I am different. Because they take different directions. They flow through different regions. But when they merge the waters in the Bay of Bengal, this diversity vanishes. So those who have not reached the highest peak of spiritual unity, those who have not realized the spiritual essence in all beings, those who have not realized the immanence and the omnipresence of the spiritual truth, will fight among themselves Dualists fight among themselves, but non-dualists do not fight with anyone, because non-dualists realize the dualists are also part of our own being. Because they can't see anything in this world. There is no otherness for them. It's not by wiping out distinctions, but rather accepting the other as our own. Otherness is removed not by rejecting, but by accepting the other's view as our own view. So there is no otherness for a non-dualist. So this is the philosophical foundation of universal religion. The great commentator Shankaracharya writes, Susiddhanta vyavasthasu, susiddhanta vajana niyameshu, etc. Ivameva esha paramartho, buddha arhadadi drishti-anusarino dvaitino nischitaha, etc. What do they say? They think evameva esha paramartha. Our path is real. All dualists, all those who follow the limited path, they would tell you, our path is right and your path is wrong. So what happens, they na anyatha tatra anuraktaha. They are attached to their own path and they have an aversion towards other people's paths. Then what happens? They are fighting because of raga and dvesha, attachment towards their own chosen path, and an equally strong aversion towards the path of other people. Itevam ragadvesho petaha susiddhanta darshana nimitteshu. What happens? They fight among themselves. Pasyandattam dushantaha parasparam viruddhinde. They fight among themselves. Then the great commentator Shankaracharya says, non-dualists do not fight. That's why it becomes the foundation of universal religion. What happens is, Taihi anyona virodhibhihi asmadiyoyam vaitikaha sarva ananyatvat atmegatva darshana paksho na viruddhide yatha sukhasta padadibhihi egam ragadvesha anaspadatvat atmegatva buddhireva, etc. So the point is this, I shall explain. Non-dualists do not have any conflict with any other religious tradition. Example is given. You cannot fight with your own hands and legs. If you are angry with your own head and you give a blow to your own head, you will hurt yourself. If you are angry with your own hand and you give a blow to your own hand, you will hurt yourself. Similarly, non-dualists, seeing their unity, their non-difference, non-distinctiveness with other religious traditions, cannot and do not come into conflict with them. Because they believe the other's path is not different from their own path. See, a commentator he goes beyond this. Yatha sukhasta padadibhihi kadajit aghade na viddesho jayate. See, suppose your left hand hits your right hand, you are not angry with your left hand. Why? Because both the right and left hands are your own. Not, they don't belong to anybody else. Similarly, a non-dualist sees his own spiritual truth expressing through other religious traditions. So the foundation, the essence of universality of non-dualism is this. The foundation is the unity of spiritual experience, not belief, not concepts, not dogmas. So it is not a kind of intellectual exchange of ideas between religious traditions. It is not interreligious dialogue, but rather the foundation is the experience, the inner experience, which a non-dualist gets when he reaches his own realization. As I said earlier, when he reaches the top of the building, And when he looks down, he can't see any distinction with regard to the gate, the first floor, the second floor, any of them, because they're all made of the same brick. For practical purposes, the gate could be considered to be different from the first floor because it serves a different purpose. But the essence is the same. The bricks, the material out of which all this, the whole structure is built, is the same. Similarly, in all religious traditions, the spiritual essence is the same. The language, the style, the diction in which these ideas are expressed may be different. The mode of expression, the mode of theological interpretation may be influenced by geographical, cultural, linguistic, and even ethnic factors, which may be different from religion to religion, from tradition to tradition. But at the experience level, it's the same. As Swami Vivekananda, who took up Sri Ramakrishna's message, said in one context, he said that no religion is wrong. We are not traveling from error to truth, but we are traveling from truth that's lower to truth that is higher. There is no such thing as a wrong truth. So as a wrong religion. Every religion is an equally valid path leading to the same goal. So that's why, in fact, in one of the famous statements, a great historian, it was supposed to be the greatest historian of 20th century, British historian, Arnold Toynbee, refers to the influence of Sri Ramakrishna's message in modern context, in the development of modern religious concepts. He doesn't refer to the Advaitic experience, but any student of Sri Ramakrishna's religious philosophy will understand that what he is referring to is the non-dualistic approach of Sri Ramakrishna's message. He says, the emergence of the higher religions seems to me to mark so important a new departure in human history that this cannot be dealt with adequately in terms of the civilizations whose declines and falls give rise to them. The idea is this. What he means is this. Civilizations come and go. And those religions which are often interpreted by theologians in narrow civilizational or ethnic or cultural terms may lose their relevance, not the essence. They lose their relevance because they are often interpreted in narrow geographical or cultural or civilizational terms. Because civilization is, after all, a natural development of human sophistication, urbanization, modernization, and so on. They come and go. But the essence of world religious traditions remain the same. But he says that in modern times, there is a tendency to move from many towards one, from the gross towards the subtle, from the civilizational to the spiritual. And when we look upon religious traditions from spiritual standpoint, we find they are the same. When we interpret them in civilizational terms, they are mutually in conflict with one another. And he says, according to Toynbee, the main cause of narrow civilizational interpretation is the dogmatic theology. All religious traditions sometimes get imprisoned within the narrow walls of a dogma, a book, a set of rituals, and, of course, a place, a distinct place of worship, which limits the presence of God in this world. But he says, in modern times, and he lived in 20th century. His study of history was written, his magnum opus, it was written in 20th century. So he says, in modern times, there is consciously or unconsciously, there's a tendency to move towards the universal from the nationalistic, towards universal from the civilizational. And this tendency, directly or indirectly, is a fruit of Sri Ramakrishna, whose message his disciple Swami Vivekananda brought to the Western world. And Toynbee was one of those rare European historians, prominent European historians, who had gone deep into the essence of Oriental culture. Mostly he got introduced to this through the works of Swami Vivekananda. He continues, on the contrary, I believe that the higher religions are themselves societies of a new distinctive species. This new interpretation of higher religions, that is what he is referring to in universal terms. Their purpose is to enable men to find a direct personal relation with the transcendental reality in and behind and beyond the universe, towards universalism, though so far they have fallen short of their spiritual aspirations. He is referring to the narrow theological interpretations which were characteristic of the Dark Ages in European history. So there is a trend, there is a move, consciously or unconsciously, to interpret religion in universal terms. Its philosophical and spiritual foundation is non-dualistic philosophy. As I already outlined, these ideas are found in the works in Rigveda, in Yajurveda, in Samaveda, Atharvaveda, all the prominent Upanishads, in the Bhagavad Gita, and especially these ideas have been graphically expounded in the commentaries of Adi Shankaracharya, which Swami Vivekananda brought to the Western world in 19th century. But Swamiji got it from Sri Ramakrishna. When Swamiji spoke, he did not speak as a scholar or as an evangelist. He spoke as one who had himself experienced the essence of what he spoke about. And his main foundation was Sri Ramakrishna's own experience. So when Swamiji speaks, it is Sri Ramakrishna who speaks through him. And the foundation, the spiritual and philosophical foundation of Swami Vivekananda's universal religion, practical Vedanta, and also his unique concept of synthesis of yoga, the realization, the Advaitic realization, the non-dualistic realization of Sri Ramakrishna. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. That's Sri Ramakrishna. Namaste.